Wilson Miles from Black Film and TV. Hello, Mr. Fishburne. How's it going?
Good. How are you, Wilson?
Good. You're playing the illustrious Doc Rivers, who's still alive, still, coaching. So what would it to say yes to taking on this project?
The writing, the story, it was so fascinating to me. I'm not a sports fan. I didn't follow the story closely, although because I live
Really?
in LA. Oh yeah. I mean, I'm not a sports fan, but I live in LA, so of course I was aware of it. I wasn't surprised that the owner of an NBA team might have some racist, you know, feelings that he might want to share with folks or not share with folks that
Mm-hmm.
got broadcast over the social media airwaves. I was surprised that he was held responsible and accountable, and that he had to ultimately uh, deal with the consequences of that. Though.
We live in a world right now where you get tried and judged by the media in order for things to lawfully take effect. You
Some of
know,
us do, not all of us, but some of us.
yes, some of us, and obviously, when it happened right there, and the league took notice, they had to because obviously it was going to impact not just the players involved and the people involved, but everywhere around, knowing
That's
that this
right.
type of racism can't go on, and taking on this role, and obviously because Doc is still alive, I'm not sure did you know Doc before this? Did you have a conversation? Because even though you said you're not in sports, you do live in LA. Was there any time period where you ever crossed paths with him?
No, I didn't know Doc Rivers. I had never heard of Doc Rivers. I had never met Doc Rivers before I read these scripts. And then once I had read the scripts, I went online and I looked him up and I saw him and I went, oh yeah, I could probably play that guy. I look enough like him.
Mhm.
Uh, Turned out that we had some mutual friends. They put us together. We talked on the phone briefly. I invited him to a Labor Day party at my home, and he came and he was very charming and very nice. And another friend of mine, Wynton Marsalis, the great trumpeter, was at this party with his band, the Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra. And Doc and Wynton immediately got into a heated debate about whether or not the late Bill Russell was the greatest who ever played the game. Uh, Bill had just passed just before this party, and there was a lot of stuff about him. There were tributes to him, and there was a film, and so I watched Wynton and Doc carry on this heated debate for about 2.5 hours about Bill Russell. That was fascinating, and it helped me to get a little glimpse of his personality and understand, who he was as a coach, as a man, as a player. Yeah.
That was going to be my next question. Obviously, there's the script and then there's meeting Doc himself because
Mhm.
you always want to make sure because he's still alive that you're playing him accurately as opposed to you don't want him saying that is not me who I am.
Sure,
They're
sure,
embellishing and so forth. How else
sure.
did you want to do it in order to embody who he was so that he likes it? Because that way he gets right.
Well, that's the thing. It's like I couldn't worry too much about whether or not he was going to like it. I
Okay.
mean, what I wanted to do was I wanted to be as honest and, let's say, authentic as I could be without it being an impersonation of the man. I mean, listen, Doc Rivers is much taller than me, first of all. I will never be as tall as he is. And most of the players, the actors who were the players, are much taller than me. Um, and I'm a tall guy. It was a new experience for me to be surrounded by a group of individuals who were all, 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 inches taller than me. And for me to be their coach, the sort of authority figure, when you're dealing with individuals who are much taller than you in stature, that's a little intimidating, you know. So I had to overcome that, and ultimately, I was able to tap into Doc's leadership style. Doc's leadership style I liken to a shepherd who is leading from behind.
Mhm.
His philosophy, it seemed to me, was about creating an environment where the players actually come together and lead by consensus. Um, that he create an environment where they could be the best players, the best teammates, and the best men that they could be, and allow them to really make decisions for themselves about, you know, how they want their team how can they be the best team that they can be.
To wrap this up, and because you're not a man of the sport, but you lived in LA, you saw what happened. Do you think in
Hmm.
over the years things have changed? That it's put everybody on notice that one, you just, what's the lesson learned? Don't say things no matter what you feel in public. And it's not the way it wasn't even in public. It was, he's having a
In
conversation, it's
private.
happening state. Because I'm sure
Mhm.
there are others who probably say things you just don't think you're being recorded.
Yes, I think obviously things have changed because of social media and the way in which social media has become a part of everyone's lives. Um, and I mean, I think it comes down to just simply being thoughtful and engaging, like thinking before one speaks is an underrated skill.
And that's how we got to do it. Think before you speak. Mr.
Yes,
Fishburne, it's
thank
been
you
a pleasure. Let's hope this gets an audience so that way people can still have this conversation and see how it goes and plays out. Have a good one.
very much. Thank you so much, Wilson. You be well.
Wilson Morales from Black Film and TV. Hello, folks. How's it going?
Hello.
How you doing?
Ed, is there anything you did outside of the script you were given to embody the character you're playing?
Well, I listened to those tapes. We had access to those tapes. And I listened to a couple of interviews that Sterling did in the past. And, just the way he kind of expressed himself. And I knew somewhat of the story, and I knew some background about him, about changing his name, for example, was kind of key for me. Somebody who changes his name from Tokowitz to Sterling, there's a reason for that. And so just little things sometimes can help you a great deal.
What about yourself, Jackie? Were you watching videos? Not that we don't look for an exact impersonation. We just want to see an embodiment. So there's the script, and then obviously, just I'm sure everybody else is going to be googling this stuff. For those who weren't out there, for those who can only remember for what they read and saw. But this is the world we live in now. We can just find things right away.
Yeah. Well, it's not a documentary. It's a piece of fiction based on real events. But in some ways, I really wanted to embody the actual Shelly. I listened every day before I went on set to her voice, so I'd get a kind of approximation of how she sounded. And the hair and makeup people did a great job of making me look very similar, I think. So yeah, we tried to be accurate. I did anyway in the look and the sound, but then the writing was just so great, and the stuff that we didn't know for sure was so beautifully imagined that I think I mean, I don't know how the real people would feel. I've played real people before, and they didn't like it at all, because you're never going to be satisfied with how someone else portrays you. I think it's just human nature. I wouldn't say that.
And then there's you, Cleopatra. You're playing V. There's what you have online. There's what she did on camera. But then, this series goes a little bit more in depth as to who she is and what was going through her mind. What did you do to try to capture that? How much more did you do besides the script?
Yeah, well, yes. Thankfully, there are YouTube clips and things that I could study. But for me, it was really about embodying her motivations in a deeper way and exploring her as a character on the page, not so much through the lens of the scandal, but just as a human being. Who is this person? And for me, I really meditated on this idea that there's this like theater of society. There are these roles that we're expected to play based on our race or our gender or our socioeconomic background. And V is someone who was like, no, thank you, I'd actually like that role over there. And that was something that I thought was so thrilling to play. And that was sort of my way in to playing her.
People like to think
Well said. That was so well.
People like to think that as we get older, we become more eccentric, and people like to give a little bit of a pass to Donald because of his age, You guys are actors, you guys have been in Hollywood, so like during this time period when it happened, had you heard about it? Ed, did you talk to anybody that knows Donald to see, was he like this prior to the tapes coming out?
I did. I ran into so many people that I knew who were either living in his apartments at the time or who had lived in one of his units. And, and I always said, what was he like? And mostly it was not flattering, but there were a couple that said, oh, he's very charming, he's very funny, a very funny guy. And so I got a kind of a mixed bag, mostly negative, but some positive. And then, of course, his sense of humor. I was surprised. I don't know why, but I was slightly surprised. So, yeah.
This whole thing came about because of social media. You get it out there, it spirals. I don't think, anyone knows how far it goes and how the people it affects, and sometimes, we live in a world where, you go to you're tried and judged by the media before any law can actually take an effect, which is what the NBA did. It was almost like they were pressured because of what everybody else was saying. Where do you see years later now how, we've seen how media can respond into galvanizing an audience for things to happen? Is this something that you can, when you look at, do you think change has happened after this has happened, after this particular incident occurred? Jackie?
Well, I think that the issue of racism has probably gotten worse in the past few years. I remember how shocked and appalled we were at the time when this happened, which is probably 8 or 9 years ago now, I think, maybe 10. But now we seem to see instances of this kind of disgraceful, disgusting behaviour more often. And maybe it's because of social media, we just have more access to it. I don't know. But I think the times have become less tolerant and more vindictive in some ways.
Anything you want to add to that, Cleopatra?
I think we're seeing it more. I don't think it's a new thing at all, but I do think we're seeing it more. And then, I do think certain people are more emboldened at the moment.
Yeah.
To say what they feel in that regard. They feel sort of protected by the powers that be at the moment. But it's important to remember these are not new views. These are things that have been around for a long time. And I do think social media makes it, you're seeing it a lot more. And it is a really interesting conversation, this idea of truth and opinion and the court of public opinion and all of this. I think the NBA obviously did the right thing here, but it is an interesting conversation.
Mm-hmm. Congrats on the performances. Great to see that everybody's, this will be a weekly series because people want to get back each week to talk about it. I'll talk to you guys down the road on your next projects.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wilson Morales from Black Film TV. Hello, folks. How's it going?
Hi.
What's up?
Very good.
How you doing?
Good. So, Gina, there's a lot of moving parts to put in this series together. Obviously, you have the Sterlings, there's V, and then there's the players. At what point was it ever challenging trying to balance it all?
Oh, all throughout, I mean, it really, now you're asking me that question and I'm starting to hyperventilate a little bit at the scale of it. No, it really, you card the show, you think it makes sense structurally, and then our writer's room was so deep into the question of how to balance an ensemble story like this. So you just rely on the community of people that you hire to make the show to make sure everything stays in balance.
Is that where you come in, Rembert? Did you come in there to provide the inside baseball as far as what was going on the inside and people's personalities?
Well, I do think being a journalist helped, both in the writer's room and just like the creation of the characters, having a familiarity both with these figures just like publicly, but also just like being around the NBA for years, like understanding what locker rooms feel like, and, like wanting the show to be authentic, and also understanding, I've spent the last 8-9 years, in the world of like NBA Twitter and like understanding, what people care about and the things, from other. So I think from the jump, I saw that as kind of some of the what do I bring to the table. I think it was a lot of the basketball stuff, but also, as we wrote the show and then made the show, the internet is a character in the show, and I was like born out of the internet, and so wanting to make sure that this felt like 2014, which was a very specific time of the internet, a messy time of the internet, which, and the idea of mess is something that kind of runs through the whole show. So yeah, those are things I felt protective of, the basketballness of it and the internetness of it. I felt like we had to do those well.
And one thing I just want to add to that is I think structurally what was always important to us in the writer's room is to make sure that the show felt like a collision course between, Doc Rivers trying to take this historically losing franchise with an incredible roster to its first championship and this sort of bizarre love triangle that's spinning out of control. So, in spite of how sort of vast this story felt, guiding it toward that collision felt like it was really giving us the structure we needed to move ahead.
There's a lot of colorful characters in here. And for you, Kevin, when you're directing this, did you have to go to tapes to look at people's personalities so that way when each of these actors are playing these characters, it's more true to who they are, so that we, the audience, for those who know these people, because all of them are still alive, they'll like, okay, that is him. That is that personality. Because as an audience, we're going to see things that we did not know. We didn't know there was a conflict between, some of the players and so forth. So we're getting all that stuff now. If you're not reading that stuff or seeing that stuff on social media or like on a sports show, talk show, or something like that.
Everybody came to play and everyone did their homework. And so Alphonse would come in and talk about very specific things that he had researched about Chris. And, Laurence had been communicating, I think, with Doc Rivers quite a bit. And then Ed has his own approach. I mean, he's in the pantheon of actors that living actors. So he had an idea of how he wanted to approach this, a kind of theatrical theater approach to it, in his specificity and what he was doing. So I'm not to be lazy, but I didn't really. They came to play, and I was always bemused when they would perform or do little things, and you would see certain aspects of the character. So it was more on the back end I would see the similarities and how well they were imitating, or creating their version of, not imitating, their version of these characters.
Technology changes everything, and so you think this whole thing started off because she was using the recording off her phone. And look how far it's taken, and where nowadays it's all about the video, So, what are we getting out of this 10 years later, that have people learned their lessons, Like, I'm sure everybody's looking at themselves and goes, don't say anything, don't do anything, how to respond, because you see how players are treated, not just players, anybody in general, anybody who's a figure through social media, like, what is the lesson to be learned from watching the series, if there's anything at all? Gina?
Well, it's interesting. I think one of the things that's changed between, 2013, 2014 and now is that at that point in time, I think that that a lot of us were a little naive about how quickly something can sort of catch on and spread online, and that once it's there, it never goes away. And I think that there's a real savviness about that now. So while, in 2014, I think the internet is moving at the speed of the internet and our characters are moving at the speed of human beings, I think now we all have that sense that, you know, the mic is always on. But I also think that, you know, it's interesting. I mean, I think that one of the things we talked about in the writer's room is why this story is still resonant after, you know, January 6th, and where, you know, the kinds of sentiments on the tape became violence and became overt acts. And I think, you know, the attitude of the show is that, you know, this sort of history that we're documenting in the show points toward where we are now as a culture.
Yeah.
Just want to say, anything you want to add? Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think about something that happens a lot. It's like someone gets famous, and then the first thing they do is go delete all their old tweets. You know, because it's like, what did I say in 2012, 2013, 2014? It was a very lawless time. It's like, I remember getting on Facebook in 2005 and like posting photos of myself just like drinking and doing everything because I thought it was only for college kids, and then people are losing their jobs because they so it feels, I think it's important, and there's so many elements of the show of like trying to show how we got to this current 2024 point. Like, you see there's a lot happening in 2014 that began to show where we were headed, both culturally, internet, politically, all of it.
Congrats on the series. I think it's one of the rare shows that I've seen all of it in one sitting.
Oh,
Wow,
awesome.
that's awesome.
You know?
Thank
And,
you.
last night I said, I'm proud of myself.
Yeah.
So congrats again.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
Yeah.